So yesterday, we uploaded a video in regards to Derrick Rose possibly getting traded to another team from the Detroit Pistons. This made a lot of sense for a plethora of reasons. You could just look at the Detroit Pistons record. It makes sense why they would want to sell as many of their assets as they possibly could. But the trade never materialized, at least not last night. It was more of at least in my impression, it was just an attempt for the Detroit Pistons to drive up the price on Derrick Rose, pretty much telling everyone, hey, we are about to trade Derrick Rose if anyone else is interested. And surely other teams were interested. Teams like the Miami Heat and the Boston Celtics made an inquiry, but ultimately that's not the team that got him. So what's going on, guys? Your boy Mike here. Before I bring you guys the news, do me a favor and smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Just leaving a like on the content does wonders in pushing out my NBA content to additional individuals that would be a fan of the NBA, so they could click on the video and hopefully smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm as well. I also wanted to give a shout out to our two latest Mike Mafia members, Kamar Colburn and Larry Moore, for joining on the Mike Mafia Soldier tier. And of course, make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter to have an opportunity to get your takes featured in the content. Now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Guys, if there's one thing that we've all been saying while watching Derrick Rose perform fairly well over the past couple of years, it's the fact that we'd like to see him freed to go and play with a contender. As a matter of fact, the last time Derrick Rose was playing on a contending roster was during the 2017 to 2018 season when he teamed up with LeBron James on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, for those of you guys that don't remember, that was the season where Kyrie Irving got traded to the Boston Celtics, and the Cleveland Cavaliers got like Isaiah Thomas and Ante Zizic and a first round pick in return for him. And they were desperately doing whatever it took to put around LeBron James a good enough team to make it to the NBA Finals one last time. And alas, it wasn't enough for LeBron James. That was the season where they ended up trading all of their off-season additions in the middle of the season. Derrick Rose got traded in the middle of the season from the Cleveland Cavaliers to the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz would end up waiving him, and then he would sign with the Minnesota Timberwolves, reuniting himself with Tom Thibodeau. And when he was on that contending team, he wasn't nearly the player he was now. He was averaging like 9.8 points per game. He was shooting 44% from the field, shooting 25% from three. And for the most part, he seemed like a broken man because he went from the youngest MVP in NBA history to a NBA journeyman within a span of a couple of years. The Chicago Bulls gave up on him. He went to the New York Knicks. He told the New York Knicks he'd like to stay in New York, but they didn't necessarily feel the same way. He went to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Cleveland Cavaliers eventually traded him so he could be waived before signing with the Minnesota Timberwolves and actually experiencing a bit of a career renaissance. During those 2 years where he was reunited with Tom Thibodeau, Derrick Rose saw his numbers increase back to 18 points per game. His field goal percentage shot up to 48%, and the one thing that completely revolutionized his game is he became a pretty average to above average three-point shooter, which did wonders for his career because he no longer had the ability to slash to the rim athletically the way he once was able to do as a young MVP, which is fine because he completely changed his game around. Eventually, he found himself on the Detroit Pistons, and in his first year with the Detroit Pistons, he performed fairly well, just continuing off the same note that he left off of in Minnesota, averaging very similar numbers to the year that he was in Minnesota, until this past season, where this is what's really strange to me. The Detroit Pistons actually went out and made some moves this offseason. Yes, they lost Christian Wood to the Houston Rockets. They brought in Jeremy Grant, who's been an absolute gem thus far. Needless to say, regardless, the Detroit Pistons are currently 5-18. And if you remember what I said in my video yesterday, you could determine how legitimate this potential Derrick Rose trade would be based off of whether he would play against the Los Angeles Lakers last night or not. And well, he didn't play against the Los Angeles Lakers last night, which means that he should be traded within the next 24 to 48 hours from when I did make that video. And well, that's exactly what happened. So Shams Charania originally broke news on this yesterday, saying that the Knicks are engaged in active trade talks to acquire Derrick Rose, with the Pistons and Rose agreeing that a trade would be best for both sides. This initially, I believe, was leaked out just so other individuals and other teams could get the idea, hey, Detroit Pistons are on the cusp of trading Derrick Rose. This is your last chance to offer something up for him. Then earlier today, Shams gave us an update saying that the Detroit Pistons are nearing agreement on a deal to send Derrick Rose to the New York Knicks for Dennis Smith Jr. and draft compensation. And this is essentially doing the same thing. It's like waving a flag to the other teams and saying, yo, we're literally getting a G League player in return for Derrick Rose. If anyone else is more interested in Derrick Rose than the New York Knicks and want to give up a little bit more, then we'll happily trade this remarkable scorer on a great contract to you guys. And as time went on, I'm assuming that's what the Detroit Pistons were trying to do, but Shams continued to report on this, saying Rose and the Pistons agreed a trade is best for both sides, clearing way for Detroit and New York to work towards agreement. Rose is on track to reunite with Knicks head coach Tom Thibodeau for the third time in his career. Dear God, Tom Thibodeau, please don't batter Derrick Rose's body. Now, Adrian Wojnarowski gave us the full breakdown of the trade. Detroit has agreed to trade guard Derrick Rose to New York for Dennis Smith Jr. and a 2021 second-round pick via Charlotte, sources tell ESPN. Rose reunites with Tom Thibodeau, who coached him in Chicago and Minnesota. Now, to be honest, what I think about this trade is I think it was done a little bit too soon. Honestly, I feel like the Detroit Pistons were a little bit too impulsive with trading Derrick Rose, and they should have at least waited for Derrick Rose to perform a little bit better so he could at least make way to a contending team. I'm sure a team like the Los Angeles Clippers or the Miami Heat or any other contending team would be more interested in Derrick Rose as the trade deadline got closer and closer. And the trade deadline arrives in about a month from now. So being so quick to grant Derrick Rose's trade request comes to me as a little impulsive on the Detroit Pistons' behalf, because you're essentially getting a G League player in Dennis Smith Jr., which I'm very high up on. I loved him in the 2017 NBA draft. I really think he's an athletic monster, and I really hope he figures it out because he was so fun to watch when he was on the Dallas Mavericks. But this is a point guard that is horrible at playmaking, that can't make any shots, and is only good at essentially dunking the ball. We're talking about Gerald Green in a point guard's body, and not current Gerald Green. We're talking about like young Gerald Green, if you guys were around back then. So if I had to grade the Detroit Pistons for this trade, I would give them a C- or a D+, and that's because they could have waited a little bit longer. It's not like the trade deadline was about to pass. They had a whole month longer to trade Derrick Rose, and this is a team that is clearly on the bottom of the league, so an additional first-round draft pick at minimum is what they should have waited for. They just sold their best trade asset for a draft bust and a second-round draft pick. So, in my opinion, that's horrible on the Detroit Pistons' behalf. Meanwhile, you have the New York Knicks. You're getting a player that clearly has a track record with Tom Thibodeau, knows Tom Thibodeau's system, knows the attitude that Tibbs is trying to bring to New York, which, by the way, the New York Knicks desperately need. The Knicks are on the up and up. Julius Randle has really stepped it up this year. He has been averaging a double-double each and every game, and that's through 24 games with 22.6 points per game and 11 rebounds per game. He's been shooting a crazy number from three, 40% from three, which is the highest value he's had in his entire career. The Knicks are legitimate playoff contenders this year, and adding a point guard like Derrick Rose to the starting five is a remarkable way to upgrade a fairly solid team that is in the midst of changing the league's perception of them. So for the New York Knicks, I give this trade an A+, because all you have to do was give up Dennis Smith and a second-round draft pick for a player that had a really good contract that is not only going to become a fan favorite that fans will root for, but is a player that is familiar with Tom Thibodeau's system and is sure and is guaranteed to improve your starting five. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about this trade. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.